Welcome everybody to the State Library of New South Wales. My name is Lydia Tasker and I'm the Head of Public Programs here at the Library. And tonight we're meeting on rainy Gadigal land. These lands have been cared for and nurtured by the Gadigal people for millennia, and sovereignty was never ceded. And as we gather to reflect on language and stories tonight, let us reflect on the incredible history of storytelling and oral tradition that has come before us in this place. I pay my respects to elders past and present, and to any First Nations people in the audience today. Can I ask you all to now ensure that your phones are either switched off or turned to silent to ensure that there are no interruptions to tonight's event. And we're delighted that you could join us all here this evening on the 2024 European Day of Languages for this special panel discussion on the art of literary translation. As an institution which holds a huge amount of literature in translation, the State Library is delighted to collaborate with the Sydney cluster of the EU National Institutes for Culture. Thank you for visiting the library today, and we hope you can come back and visit us again soon, either by pulling out items from the collection. Come and see our friendly staff in the reading room. They'll be able to find you some incredible literature and translation, or come and check out one of the exhibitions that we have upstairs in the gallery. And I will now hand over to the brilliant directors of the Instituto Cervantes, Italian Cultural Institute, the Goethe-Institut, Alliance Française, and the Embassy of the Netherlands to introduce the event.
It is a wonderful rainy afternoon to celebrate this wonderful European, International European Day of Languages, and we are here to represent the unity of the unique cluster here in Australia. We'll do a very short presentation of who we are and what we represent, and we'll give the floor to our speakers and moderator, which is the most important part. I am from Instituto Cervantes in Sydney. We are the representative of the Spanish language, and we promote also Hispanic culture. So any country with Spanish as the mother tongue, which are more than 20 countries. We work in the whole of Australia and New Zealand, and I have a wonderful team of just around 6 people, along with John here, my cultural attaché, and it is wonderful to be here with my colleagues from France, from Italy, and from Germany.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Denis Morandet. I'm the General Manager of the Alliance Française in Sydney. I'm very happy to be here today with you in this beautiful building of the New South Wales State Library. Thank you very much for hosting us. I'm also very happy to be here with my colleagues from the European Union Cultural Centre Cluster. We try to do a lot of events to promote European languages and European cultures. So today is a special day for us. And I want to thank you for joining us tonight, and all the wonderful people who are going to take place here in a few minutes and walk through the art of translation in the age of artificial intelligence, not intelligence artificielle. I was already switching back to French. Sorry for that. I hope you have an enjoyable evening, and I'm going to let maybe my colleague from the Goethe-Institut now take over.
Thanks a lot. Merci beaucoup. Bonsoir, buenas tardes, buonasera, good evening. We're really happy to be here tonight, and we have 2 things to offer in Europe. One is fantastic languages, and it's so much fun. And as a director of the German Culture Institute, I can only invite you to learn Italiano or French, Espanol. It's such fun. Second thing we're very proud of is our very own century-old tradition of winemaking. So we're digging deep in our caves, and we've got wines from all these countries. So stay long enough, and yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, you said it all. There's nothing left for me to say. My name is Paolo Barlera. I'm the director of the Instituto Italiano di Cultura in Sydney. I don't have the whole of Australia like Coral, but I have New Zealand. And that's why I have invited my good friend Marco Sonzogni here to speak. It's a wonderful opportunity for us to promote European languages and culture, and I hope you will keep following us on future events like this. Thank you for coming, and thank you for the State Library for hosting this. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. Good evening. Thank you for coming. Thank you, Lithia, for the nice introduction. It's a pleasure to be here at the State Library of New South Wales. It's, of course, the place to be for literature, and we will be talking about literature today. Thank you to our panelists. I will introduce these in a moment. We don't have that much time, so we will be racing a little bit through the program, but of course, afterwards, there will be time for informal chats about AI and translation and creativity and so on, over a glass of wine, as Christoph mentioned. And thank you, of course, to the organizers of the event. My name is Jochen. I work for the Goethe-Institut. You've just seen Christoph, my boss, the director of the Goethe-Institut here in Sydney for Australia, and of course Coral and Paolo and Denis. Great work in putting this together. Thanks for making it happen. And now I'll quickly introduce the speakers. Like I said, we don't have much time, so please forgive me for being a little bit like a I don't know if you collected these soccer cards and stuff like that, where you have like just a name. So it's like, I'll start with you, May-Brit. So May-Brit Ackerholt, location, New Zealand, location, Blue Mountains, language, Norwegian, novels, short stories, essays, plays, poetry. Among the authors you've translated are big names such as Henrik Ibsen and Jon Fosse. And you also work in theatre. In fact, you have been a resident dramaturg at the Sydney Theatre Company, which is amazing, of course. Secondly, Marco, over here on the far side of the stage, location, New Zealand. This time I'm right. Wellington, to be precise. Thanks for bringing the weather, mate. Nice move. Language, Italian mostly. Scholar, translator, poet, editor, cultural activist, editor of the translations of Seamus Heaney, an Irish poet who won the Nobel Prize. By the way, Jon Fosse also just won a Nobel Prize, so there's a bit of heaviness with prizes here in the room today. And you're also the director of the New Zealand Centre for Literary Translation and professor at the university. And Chris Andrews over here, location Sydney, languages Spanish and French, mostly. And 9 books by Roberto Bolaño, 10 books by Cesar Ayer, thank you, and Marcelo Cohen and many other authors. So another well-packed person right next to me with lots of literary translations under their belt. And you've worked at the University of Melbourne and University of Western Sydney as well. So let's jump right into it. And I'd like to do that with 2 quotes that I found on Marco's university website. One is by an unknown guy called Alexander Pushkin. He said, the translator is a career of the human spirit. And then Jorge Luis Borges, forgive the pronunciation, said translation is a more advanced stage of civilization. So these are pretty good little quotes I found to open the evening. But before we go into the big topics, I'd like to talk a little bit, or like get a little bit of a sense from the 3 of you, what your day looks like. Just what is it like? Of course, we've got these big words, but translation is also hard work. Would you maybe like to start, May-Brit? As a translation, I understand, is your main source of income, and that's how you make a living. How long does it take to translate a play? And I don't know, how does it work? Tell us.
Well, I do it freelance now, but I used to work in the theatre. So I used to be able to translate a play. I was very lucky because I was a translator and dramaturg for Sydney Theatre Company. I worked with Neil Armfield. I learned, in a sense, from the top, and I worked with the best actors. So I learned from them. The thing is, you translate for actors. You translate a work that has been written by somebody else, and you write it again, but you write it with performance in mind. You don't write it for somebody, for theatre, for somebody to read. You write it for somebody to perform. You write it for somebody to move, to say a word to somebody else. It is totally different to translate a poem, which I always do as well, or to a novel that somebody reads in bed. It all has a certain poetry. It all has a certain rhythm. But when you translate in the theatre, you translate for an audience, for an actor who speaks to somebody else, and both of them speak to an audience who listen to them and consume what they are saying. So the time it takes is not minutes, has nothing to do with time. It has to do with what you sit at home and think about, take to the rehearsal room, and work with the director, work with the actors, then go to the audience.
Thank you, May-Brit. And Marco, your workday looks maybe a little bit differently, working in a university, in a translation department. Can you explain a little bit how it works? Like translation in itself, obviously there needs to be from one language into another language. I don't know how big is a department like that. Can you talk a little bit to that?
Yes, it's a very, very difficult question. Well, first of all, very nice to see you all. Thank you, Paolo, for bringing me over. And I take the opportunity to bring the blessings and to acknowledge the indigenous people of Aotearoa, New Zealand. We're on the same waka, and that waka has brought me across the ditch today. Translation at Victoria University is pretty much a one-man show now, and c'est moi. But and it's become weird because the language that I translate into and out of, Italian into English, English into Italian, the department has been closed last year. And so the pedagogical side of it is gone, but the echo of the language is still there. I teach intercultural communication, I teach translation theory, I have administration, I supervise too many PhDs, 34, 16 finished and 18 ongoing, and there's another 3 or 4 that want to come and start. All around translation and from different languages with different perspectives. But what's the common thread is translation is in my day, every day. And it will be relieving for you to know that I'm translating from Chinese, and I don't know Chinese, but we'll tell you a little bit more about this later.
Okay, wow, fascinating. Thank you, Marco. And that brings us to you, Chris. 20 plus books under your belt. What's your life like?
Well, at the moment, I've stopped teaching, so I'm like May-Brit, I can do it throughout the day. There's a lot of redrafting, and one thing I like is getting stuck. I like coming up against a block and then telling myself that's what you do it for. You do it to find something challenging and interesting, and then going for a little walk around the house or the garden and pulling up some onion weed or something while the bits of the sentence rearrange themselves in my head and hopefully fall into a better arrangement. So.
Okay, The Art of Translation, as you can see here, the title is pretty long. It's got lots of words in it. The Art of Translation in the Age of AI. I'd like to break up the talk a little bit into the sections of this title. Maybe we can talk about the art of translation first. Translation, of course, has different aspects to it, and there's many uses for it. The art of translation is something that is maybe a little bit sometimes in the shadows of the original text. or it is not as well recognized sometimes in the world as is the original text. Now, something happened this year which was quite interesting for us also at the Goethe-Institut. Jenny Appenbeck wrote a book, and she got the Booker Prize for it together with her translator, Michael Hoffmann. So that gives us hope that maybe the translation as a profession is leveled a little bit more with the writers of the original text, and I know that you're all writers as well. Can we talk a little bit about the respect that you receive as the translators of some of the biggest names in literature? Do you feel that is changing? Is there something in the air now that the profession of translation is lifted a little bit in comparison to former years? Chris, would you like to start on that, maybe?
Sure. I think definitely there's more visibility for translators now than there was, say, 20 years ago, partly because of the campaigning of translation activists like Lawrence Venuti or Jennifer Croft with her campaign to name translators on the covers of books. On the other hand, the material conditions under which translation is done have really not changed very much. So it's still very precarious work. It's not very well paid in general. And it's very hard to see into the future, to see what you'll be doing in a few years' time. So.
Marco, what's your perspective on this?
Oh, I agree completely. I'm not entirely sure that those who that the issue of the translator's invisibility is a real issue. The translation doesn't happen by itself. The translator in his day-to-day activity is always visible. So it's always someone else's recognition that we are after, not our own recognition. And I gave up that fight a long time ago. I actually don't care anymore. I try to get my job done well, and if the job is done well, it'll speak for itself. And the other thing I'll say is the generosity of art of the author. We were discussing that. Shemusini or Fosse or other Nobel, they wouldn't be Nobel laureates without the work of translators. Be nice if they shared the prize as well, but that's another story for another day.
May-Brit, Jon Fosse, I think that was 1 year ago that he got the Nobel Prize, right? How did it feel?
Generosity is definitely the word, and we should. What's the word in your language?
The money.
Yes. I often work for nothing, because if I don't do it, the Norwegian writers will not be done in other languages, because people cannot read Norwegian. So I have 2 or 3 Norwegian playwrights who are done in Poland, sometimes in America, sometimes in other languages, because they read my English translations and then they translate them to their native languages and perform them in their languages and pay the Norwegian writers their 10%. But I see nothing. But I do it happily, because otherwise they would earn nothing. But I would like to just say, translation is the wrong word. We do not translate. Right. That means we can translate a document, we can translate a passport, but we rewrite. We adapt one work, a creative piece of writing, to another creative piece of writing in another language. We do not translate. I don't translate anymore. I write. This is a work by Jon Fosse in English by me.
Yeah, I'd like to pick up on that, actually. With staying with Jon Fosse, it's just an example, but when he received the Nobel Prize just now, the committee said, and I'm quoting this, his works give voice to the unsayable. And before we go into AI, I think that might be a segue to get into the more technical part of translation. What is the unsayable? What is it? Can you define it or can you name it? Do you see it? Does it jump at you out of the text? Or where is it? What is it? Fill us in.
He isn't understood in English-speaking countries. They don't get him. It's as simple as that. He is very, very different. We still, in Australia particularly, we still do Carol Churchill and Arthur Miller, partly because we don't get funding. Australian art is not funded. Compared to Scandinavian kunst og kultur, I'm thinking in Norwegian now, we do not get funded. European art is seen as part of a country's growth, of a country's development. In Australia, it's not. After a lot of years of liberal government to put the blame where it should be, let's say Australia Council a few years ago just cut theatre funding 10 million 1 year, just like that. A lot of small theatre companies just couldn't survive anymore. And that has happened quite often. So they cannot do theatres by unfamiliar people because people don't buy tickets. They can't take risks. And Jon Fosse doesn't sell because they don't get him. I could keep talking for a long time, so I know we don't have time.
I think there's a danger of preaching to the converted when you praise the European cultural institutes in this room. Marco, you're a writer as well, a poet. You play with language when you write. You use humor, other literary devices. When you write your own texts, do you think of how they would translate or how somebody else would read them if they're not capable of reading your mother tongue?
Sometimes I like to feed them to my students. There's a sort of a masochistic interest in that. But sometimes, actually, it's a very good question. Because I've been living now 32 of my 53 years in an English-speaking countries, I'm starting to worry that I'm losing a bit my instinctive pool of poetry out of my language. So occasionally I've got intrusive thoughts of English language comes in. Now bits and pieces of Chinese that come in weird ways. The Marco Polo syndrome, if you like. But Italian survives. And actually what's saving me is I'm writing in my indigenous language. I'm writing in my dialect, the dialect spoken by my grandparents. And that's my connection with the soil. And I think that's where I'm moving between. And I do, of course, ask myself as a translator, what would other people think of my own writing when they translate it? It's a healthy question. It keeps me in check. But the bottom line is, I wish I were a better writer. Then I would be translated. That's what I'm thinking. So a lot of work to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, interesting. Brings us to Chris. Ariera and Bolaño, that's not easy literature, right? I mean, these are complex works. What are the main challenges for you to bring them from one country into the next country or from one language into the next language?
Well, Iris springs to mind immediately because I'm working on him at the moment. Mm-hmm. One of the difficulties there is just following what he means. He's a writer who moves from the straightforward, clear, convincing arguments, and then he moves very, very gradually into nonsense. And he really does get to nonsense at the end. So you have to be trying to grade your own slide to match his. So that's a challenge. That's tough. Yeah. With Bolaño, in some of the works there were very long sentences with a lot of subordination, which required a lot of reorganization of syntactic elements. So that was a tricky thing.
Yeah, that sounds like a very technical type of aspect that you also have to somehow master, right? Yeah. Yeah, that brings us to speaking of the technical aspect, I think we have to move in the direction of the last two letters up here, AI. Maybe Marco, as somebody who works in the field of translation in the academic field, could you give us an overview where we're at? Like, what's the current state of affairs in terms of what is it that machine translations, AI, machine learning, and so on can do, and what it can't do, or where is the? I'm sure it's mostly a gray zone, but like, can you try and bring us up to speed where we are?
I'll try. Like any new intervention, there's a mixture of excitement and fear. And excitement is nurtured by those who are excited by these things, and fear is nurtured by those who fear these things. I recognize the same excitement, the same fear that happened when Trados, for example, translation memory, was introduced. AI is going to stick around. And so for me, it's never an issue of evil thinking. The worry I have is that every day I get the bus to go to university, and every day I hear a student talking about, oh, I got my essay done with ChatGPT. So the ethics of it, and we are lucky at Victoria because we have a professor of artificial intelligence, Professor Ali Knott, who has advised the European Union, and I'm very proud that Europe has actually come out with the first model of legislating what's good and not good. That's the AI Act. Now, in terms of translation, I think of those who make money, make a living as translator. AI is going to help them do 3, 4, 5 jobs where without it you may be doing one. It's the same as Google Translate did when Google Translate became Google Translate. A lot of people started making fun of it. No, it's not good enough. What actually I find interesting is people talk about AI as if AI is a human invention. It's like it's not an entity that excludes the human. In fact, I'm going to boast for 10 seconds. I have more support from scientists than I have from colleagues in the humanities. We're now starting a project at Victoria on human-AI interaction and translation, what is called collaborative intelligence. There must be something good there. And I'll close with an example, something that I find so uplifting. Within 1 week from arriving in China, I watched a program on television, and this 8-year-old little girl closed her eyes and recited a poem by Lo Bin Wang, Ode to a Goose. It's a 4-liner, beautiful poem. A few little things: a neck towards the sky, the sound, and the white feathers, and the red palmed feet paddling the water. And the poem begins with and quack, 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 quack. So I get it. And so I said, okay, let me try. So I promised my students that I use artificial intelligence to get from Chinese to English. And he gave me a bit of prose. And then I said, hold on a second, this guy was 7. He saw a goose. What did I think when I saw the goose? I'm a country boy, so can I use the F word? No, I can't, can I? A goose is a fucking goose, right? So, and I remember, right, I heard it before I saw it, and that it was, long neck, white feathers. And so we started working, and I asked from the student, can you recite it for me? So that was tonal, And I gave a seminar about all that. I said nothing, and at the end someone said, do you actually speak Chinese? Because you capture the tonality of the Chinese so well. I wrote a poem, I translated it to English, and I said, no, I don't, but I've used Neural Writer, which is an artificial intelligence, ChatGPT, advanced ChatGPT-driven artificial intelligence for translation. Now, I'll finish with this. Neural Writer as a function now, this is artificial intelligence, as a function called AI detector. I think it's great. AI imposing ethics on itself. It's a long way to go, but it's here to stay. I'm up for it, and I think we don't have to worry. Human-AI interaction, not one or the other, both, for the better.
Okay. Chris, what about you? Your career has started before AI was there, and now it's coming into it. Of course, there's younger people who are born into a world that already has it. Are you using it? What's your take?
I played with it a little bit at the sub-sentence level. I totally agree with Marco. It's not going anywhere. I think a lot is going to depend on how it's used. One thing I am worried about is that I've heard that some literary translators are now being offered contracts for post-edition of an automatically translated text. And that worries me because there's a very strong priming effect that's bound to come into play. That is, if there's something in the draft that you're revising, a draft that a machine has made, you may not ever correct your way back to the good idea you would have had spontaneously. Especially with word order and syntactical element order in sentences and paragraphs. So I think there are all sorts of things to worry about, but since it isn't going anywhere, the important thing is to look after the ethical problems and train people to use it in a good way.
Yeah, rhythm, melody, tone, and these are all very soft aspects, so to speak, about communication, I guess. May-Brit, you are, correct me if I'm wrong, but you're more on the skeptical side. Do I get this right?
Very skeptical, but of course it's here to stay. But there's no doubt about that on a certain level. I mean, that is a great story. And there's no doubt that we have to accept it on that level. You were telling a great story. But so was Cicero when he was translating Demosthenes in the year 46 before Christ. And it was the same story, but without the AI. We have not changed because he was translating Demosthenes. It just reminded me of this. Translated Demosthenes saying, I was not interpreting him, because that was you were doing. You were interpreting that duck. But I was creating an orator of him and retelling what Demosthenes was doing and recreating him while you were just interpreting the duck. And that is, gosh, I was trying to...
I wrote a good poem about it.
Yes, you did. You wrote a very good poem. Very good poem about it.
Four memorable lines.
Yes. But Jon Fosse, the Nobel Prize winner, his poem, I tried to AI his poem, and the AI made an absolute total, I'm not going to swear, mess of it, total mess of it. But so I wrote to an AI coordinator, and I said, I'm a PhD and I translate, and I'm trying to create this poem. And they said, no. You can do it, but AI can't. It said very clearly, AI is a tool. It is not a creative thinker. And I think that is the difference, and that will always be the difference. There will be a certain level where the creative thinking will be on a level that an AI tool cannot reach. At the moment, anyway, I do not think we can. I have so many stories. Again, I'm afraid.
No, but you see.
Yes.
You guys know Primo Levi, the Holocaust chemist and Holocaust survivor.
Yeah.
In 1960, wrote a short story called The Versifier.
The Versifier.
Yeah. It's a machine. He sees it.
Yes.
It's ChatGPT.
Yeah.
He sees it. So the machine needs the past and the present to exist.
Yes.
The human sees the future.
Yes.
If you combine both with sound ethics, it can work.
Yeah.
I'm not going to change your mind, by the way.
No, you're not.
I will be sending you my 4 memorable lines about the duck.
Very good. I look forward to reading it and translating it to another language.
The beginning is a masterpiece. Quack, quack, quack.
Do you know what? I have read that.
There you go. It's a nice place to start.
Yeah. We could continue this for a long time.
No, but you're right. And
I have brought Jon Fosse's poem in an AI version, So I'm going to give it to you.
But maybe one day somebody will feed AI with all your translation of Ian Foster.
Yes.
Will teach the machine how to translate it because of your work.
Could be.
And the translation quality will improve.
Yes, one day it might.
AI is it's intertextuality at the highest speed. The more we teach the machine what to use and how to use it, the better it will get. It doesn't. So if you feed a machine 1 million translations, say, into English from Norwegian, legal Norwegian, AI will get legal Norwegian eventually. So that's the prompt, that's the hope that I want to allow myself, that harvesting as much text as possible. So maybe one day AI will speak Norwegian in your voice.
But what about when the pattern changes? Because I have another story.
You're educated. You're educated.
Changed once.
Yeah, you change the pattern. You educate the machine to the change. It's human feeling it.
No, but you have to know if the pattern changed just one place, but not another.
Oh, you'll find a way to teach the machine to recognize that.
Okay. You may change a machine, teach the machine to change anything in 2,000 years.
I think collaborative intelligence is a nice way to look at it, or human AI interaction, whatever I want to call it. But I'm hopeful.
Okay. That's I'm taking the word hopeful and running with it. Obviously, we are being taught, not just in translation, in many areas of AI use at the moment, that there is, of course, there are, like everything in life, there are different ways of looking at it. You can, as a positive thinker, you can look at the opportunities that it will give us. You can also look at the threat to your profession, and translation is not the only field that is under investigation in that respect. Can we just leave the holy tower of literary translation for one moment? Of course, there's also just the hard work of translation of just non-fiction texts. I don't know, manuals, how to fix a light bulb in a 2011 Kia Rondo, stuff like that. And also, as you mentioned before, there's a whole host of NATI-accredited translators who make a living from translating just birth certificates and other legal documents. Do you feel that that is something that is under threat of being done by machines? Is there, like, let alone the rich subtext of poetry and drama and so on? Do you think that these people need to worry for their jobs?
Me?
Chris?
Well, I think, yeah, I do think there is, those jobs are threatened to some extent. In that kind of practical translation, the stakes are often very high.
Mm-hmm.
A mistake in a technical manual or in a birth certificate or a marriage certificate can have very serious consequences.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe there's the role for the human is going to shift towards careful checking.
Mm-hmm.
But I imagine that artificial intelligence will be coming in the making of the first drafts more in those fields.
Mm-hmm. Marco, do you have the students that you see now, young people growing up in like digital natives and so on? It'll be completely normal for them, for that to for like AI translation to have been around forever, basically, as long as they can think. Do they see careers like you said, your department is not as strong as it used to be in that field still?
I think the nature of the career will change. So I'm giving an example. I was trapped in an airport in Auckland because of flooding. And communities so this is Aotearoa, New Zealand, a country I love dearly, is completely unprepared for crisis translations. You have an emergency, the emergency is now, it's not in 5 weeks. To get a translation done, you may need a week too. And now research shows it's too slow.
Yeah.
So the machine can do that.
Yeah.
You find water there, the police is around the corner. And so you train a new generation of, I think post-editor is a poor term, of expert that can actually say, yeah, that sentence works, send it off. This is accurate, can go. And that's not enough. The New Zealand guy, one of my PhD students, single-handedly project manager for Jacinda Ardern's cabinet, all the translation for the pandemic. Okay? Now, the problem wasn't the translation. The problem was, will that translation reach the community in time? And will that community receive it in terms? So if you teach people intercultural communication, how to recognize when a sentence, a micro sentence is a fragment of a culture. It's in a culture in a nutshell. So changing the nature of the teaching, the nature of the profession, will prepare a new generation of language and culture expert. Maybe the dynamic of the translation job will change, but not the quality assurance. That's where I have hope. As an educator, if I don't have hope, why do I get up in the morning? I want to get up in the morning and say to my students, you will have jobs. It's just a different job.
It's absolutely right. I think about some of the Anita House novel set in early Aboriginal time. She's teaching us what the little Aboriginal girl stands there looking at the new white people coming in, and she says to her dad, "But look, a 4-year-old, look, they're building the houses of stone on the river. What are they going to do when the flood comes? They can't move the houses off." They haven't learned that yet, of course. And that is what we still haven't learned. So we haven't learned, it is not the language itself. We haven't learned how to live in this country of ours. So that's what you're saying, isn't it?
Yes, and funding is an issue that you mentioned. So training, having resources to train the next generation of translators and interpreters to adjust to this new thing,
Yes.
And rather than being hostile towards technology, learn how that technology can make them better humans, better linguists, and cultural experts. And the combination of the two is wonderful.
Yeah.
And in fact, now there's an app being developed in New Zealand that will do exactly that. There'll be a fast action, and the translation will go to an expert who will say, yeah, the sentence microbits.
Yeah.
Chris, would you like to pick up on that?
I think about funding, because you're mentioning funding for the next generation of translators and interpreters. Would just want to add language learners too. I think one danger with AI is that it's possible that senior management in universities and the education departments get so enthusiastic about what AI can do that they accelerate the defunding of language learning. The department, the Italian department at Embajada closed. Languages in New Zealand and Australia, language departments are being closed. Contact hours for language teaching are being eroded because people have always resented the fact that language gets an extra hour or something, as if it didn't need extra time, extra face-to-face time for people to develop their language skills in a sustained way. Chemistry needs a 3-hour prac. Languages need a bit more time as well. So I think the danger is partly rhetorical. It's partly that AI will be used as a rhetorical weapon against languages.
Yeah.
And the teaching of languages.
Yeah.
So sorry, but I think there's a real danger.
Well, you can still learn languages at one of the institutes who are all sitting there. You can just talk to them with real people and in a real room. We're going to open to questions from the floor. Before we do that, can I do a little silly thing? Can I pose a little fan question to the three of you? I know you're all very deep in the subject matter. Do you have like a literary project, a translation project, where you would say, this is something that has forever inspired me, that it's something I read, maybe both versions or so, and I felt like that was something that really kicked me. Maybe it was an inspiration in your career or something. Have you got something, Chris? You look like you may.
An early thing was Norman Thomas Di Giovanni's selected poems of Borges, which has translations of the poems by lots of different poets, mainly American poets, but also Alistair Reid, who's Scottish. It's a wonderful book, and that was a big encouragement for me to learn Spanish.
Second Borges mentioned today. Marco?
Yes, it's a gloss in Irish that a not too sober monk leaves as he's transcribing Latin grammar. He goes off for lunch, and I think he has a drink too many, and he starts writing in Irish, and he has this beautiful eight syllable, very short poem, which Shemusini has translated into English, preserving the rhythm, and I put that back into my own dialect and the same rhythm. And there's a blackbird in it. I love animal poems. That was a moment when the whole process of learning a bit of Irish, being in awe of Shemusini, and feeling the gratitude for my parents who were teachers, and me learning the grammar, an ancient language and modern languages, the language, the indigenous language of Ireland, my dialect. That was a moment when I said, that's home for me. And that's a space that AI will never take away from me, but maybe will give me new pairs of eyes to see it.
I don't know, there are so many moments. I think, not as a translator, but I had a grandfather who was an idealist and taught himself many languages and taught me to communicate via languages, because in Norway, nobody speaks Norwegian in the world except for a few million people. So he taught himself Esperanto, having been through 2 world languages, thinking that the only way to have peace in the world is to communicate with the rest of the world, to speak with the world, to open the world up, to translate the world as you see it to other people. And so I spoke Esperanto, and he had Esperanto classes in my town, and we spoke Esperanto to each other. And I thought that was a great inspiration for me to communicate with people. Although we all spoke Norwegian, but we learned to speak to each other in another language. And that was a great inspiration for me to open up in another language and feel that you had to reach the world, because you needed peace in the world. You don't need war. You need peace. So that was an inspiration for me, and I don't know whether that has anything to do with what you were actually asking.
Oh, never mind. That's cool. That's cool. We'll just run with it. No, thank you. Yeah, I love the passion behind all 3 of you. I'll just be bold and share my translation project. It's Simone Pérec, La Disparition. I don't know if you know this book. It's a French book, an author who wrote an entire novel without using the word E. And I read it in English because I don't speak French. Sorry, guys. But you can read it in English, the translation by Gilbert Adair, and it reads like a novel, and you wouldn't realize that the letter E is not in the English translation either. So that's for me mind-blowingly, just technically difficult thing to do, and it happened in the 60s, not now through AI. Okay, that's enough of me. Thank you all for coming. Do you have questions to these 3 wonderful, bright minds? Please just raise your hand.
Thank you so much. This was absolutely fantastic. I'm really grateful that you all came together to organize this. That's such a gift. I just wanted to ask some technical, geeky question, because that's something that Marco said that really intrigued us. And also, I think maybe everyone else can say something. You said something about AI as kind of an enhanced intertextuality tool. What do you mean? Can you tell us more about that?
Imagine, and you're a translator, Valentina, imagine you're translating a medieval French poem, and you want to translate it as a poem. I am old school here. I think a poem should be translated as a poem, right?
Yes.
It's like you don't go to a restaurant and say, "Can I have a burger?" and they bring you a Napoleon or some of those.
We could sing it.
Soggy, yeah, we could sing. So imagine you are translating a medieval poem from French, and you have a machine that in 30 seconds is able to bring up loads of literary text in medieval Italian. and it gives you then a canvas to choose from. I don't think that that process of selection you'll be doing is less creative than if you didn't have that. So I think of a selection at the speed of light, to say, hey, you know what, this is all I found. These are all words, sentences, expressions, adjective, verbs in medieval Italian that I could harvest. Of course, this is visionary, if you like, maybe in 3,000 years, digitalizing all text. I think that's intertextuality, the speed of light. And then you'll be able to say, okay, so this poet in medieval French is using this image. Oh, my poet in my tradition has used this verb. Maybe there's a connection here. And as will you be called a translator? Will you be called I don't know, a ventriloquist? Or I'm actually at the moment in a space where I'm using the concept evolutionary translation. And I'm using, to keep things brief, a line by Shemusini says, whatever is given can always be reimagined. We rewrite. And I think what AI can do for us is helping us start in the best possible, with the best foot forward. It's not there, it's just an idea, but that's how I see it. And maybe with ancient text it's not as possible, but with more modern text, but think technical translation, translate a contract. The machine can harvest millions of wordings of legal contracts in Italian. That gives you an idea of what a legal contract can be. I'll be more comfortable translating. Of course, then you need to know the legal system you're going towards, but I don't see conflict, I see collaboration. So maybe I'm biased in that regard. I see the collaborative space and the evolutionary space rather than the cheating or the unethical. I've stared at evil in the eye. I was interpreting during the peace process in Northern Ireland. I've seen the abuse on the Catholic minority. I've seen the genocide in the wars in Kosovo. I've stared at evil in the eye, and it doesn't look like AI, I can assure you that.
Let's talk about transliteration.
I think it's educational.
AI.
It's on us
and
to make a good use of it.
How do you train people to use it ethically?
Transliteration.
Yes.
Can you give us an example?
Maybe. No, I'm just trying to understand what transliteration is in this context and with AI, because of the way that it literally translates everything. You know, you can say to something on chat, write me a poem about tomato. Yes. And it'll do it in 5 seconds, and you get 7 lines that sound quite sensible about tomatoes. Look, I don't want to send you off on a tangent here, but I'm most interested to know more in how do you train people to use AI ethically?
How do you train people to use AI ethically in the space of translation, of literary translation?
It's like it's like when you read a book, say you read a book, you like a sentence, and say, oh, this sentence is lovely, and guess what? I wrote it. It's my sentence. That's unethical. You reference someone else's work. So if you are doing a translation, if I'm doing a translation and say I'm translating a poem, very literal, very simple poem, the dark poem, then comes up, I change a word here, a word there, or I put in something. I have no problem saying, which is what's happening now on Instagram with photography, I have no problem saying, translated with the support of AI, or post-edited after. So the question I'm asking myself is another one. If I come to you and I say, hey, you know, I don't speak this language, but I know you do and you're competent and you're expert, can you write a creed for me? Then you do it, and then I do my own translation, I win a prize, everyone praises me. Now, that's what Ezra Pound did with Chinese poetry and Latin poetry. And in fact, a Latin scholar said, there's only one option for Mr. Pound, suicide, because he didn't speak either language. So it's how you treat your source. I think that's the space, that's where the ethics is for me. I'm not afraid of AI. If AI will do a better job than me, fantastic. I want to work with it. And by the way, I'm not the AI version of myself. Yeah? I'm real. So I don't have an answer for you, but I think we are in the process of negotiating that space. And to me, it's a question of speed. Now, if you go back to the Middle Ages and you ask somebody, you want to write a letter from the school of Baghdad when they were translating anything from Sanskrit into Arabic and down to the school of Toledo, it might have taken 6 years for the letter to travel. Now we've got email. So I think judging AI now that we don't know enough about it, let's see where we are in 10 years when the picture is a little bit clearer. But to shut the door against it, I'm not entirely sure I'm ready for it.
I'm not sure we can anyway. No. So it's not an option.
I couldn't answer that. Yeah.
Well, on that note, on not shutting the door, we will open the door to the wine. Nice little bridge there. I'm pretty proud of myself. So we don't have time for more questions from the floor, but of course, these wonderful people will be around. So please continue the conversation. Let's all get together. We've got the representatives of the European institutions here. You can have a chat with them. Please put your hands together for Dr. May-Brit Ackerholt. Ackerholt. She tried to teach me how to pronounce it. Ackerholt. Okay, May-Brit Ackerholt in English. Please, May-Brit. And over here, Dr. Chris Andrews. And Marco Sonzogni. Thank you. Enjoy your day of European languages. Thank you.
Can we have a round of applause for these guys?